I will bring you our Chris Burns is our next speaker. And Chris, hi Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful
Excellent.
Friday.
It is, I'm really
Good to
great
be
weather
here.
out here in Toronto as well. So let me just read Chris's bio for you, because Chris has some golden nuggets for us as well. Chris Burns is a serial entrepreneur at heart, a two-time published author, a keynote speaker, and an adjunct professor with a deep passion for digital marketing. With over 20 years in the marketing industry, Chris has helped hundreds of businesses, including his own, to thrive by embracing digital marketing. His approach has always been about helping businesses shine in their uniqueness, steering them away from the mundane and into the spotlight. His goal with most things is to make it so easy that it's actually fun again. So easy, you'll have no excuses. Chris is also the co-author of Hustle Leadership and co-host of the Hustle Nation podcast. And with that, I give you Chris Burns. Take
Good
it away.
morning, everybody. Thanks for having me, Marianne. Love these events. I feel very fortunate to be a part of them. I want to share my screen just for a minute because I do have a free digital download that anyone who's on this call can access and can kind of work through a little bit with me. So I think
Go for
I've got that access now.
it. Mhm.
And can you see my screen? Okay, awesome. So this is the topic we're going to talk about. I'm not going to share my screen the whole time, but for many entrepreneurs, regardless of what business you're in or how big your business is, you talk to people so often, and what is the number one thing people say after they say, I'm good or I'm fine? I'm busy. Oh, so busy. We wear that as a badge of honor so often. And it's like, oh, I'm grinding. I'm working 60 hours a week, 70. I've heard people even say 100 hours a week, which doesn't even seem physically possible, nor does that seem like something anybody wants to do. I think we could all agree on that. Even for those of us like me who enjoy working, I really enjoy being busy. I just cannot sit still. However, there is a time and a point where we all need to stop and smell the roses. We need to enjoy life. You'd hate to look back 20 years from now and say, my gosh, I wish I would have had more fun. I wish I would have went on that road trip or vacation with my friends or family. Wish I would have done these things. You don't want to live with regrets. And so I think it's important to be busy, but more importantly, be productive. And so often, busy does not equate to results. Busy does not equate to achieving your goals. Busy many times means chasing your tail like a dog would do in your living room. We don't want to do that. We want to help you in this quick workshop on crafting a vision to get out of the hamster wheel, avoid the burnout, and ultimately maximize your productivity. So I won't spend too much time talking about myself, but I do want to give you a chance, anybody who's on the call, to access this digital download. It is free. We know we won't spam you or share your contact information, but it's a tool that we offer or provide when we do our paid workshops. So we do corporate engagements for several $1,000s. This is a tool that we give them and provide for that fee. And so it can be extremely valuable if you follow through on it. If you don't do it, there's no value to it. But want to give everyone a chance to download it, and I'll get to what it is and why it's important in just a moment. So if you haven't, go ahead and grab that. If not, no big deal. There'll be another chance I can share my screen again later for you to be able to access that. So, all right. Big thing as I start off with is I want you to visualize a hamster wheel and think of a hamster or a mouse just spinning in that wheel as fast as they can. So often that is the business that we live in. We spin that hamster wheel. We do it for 60, 70, 80 hours a week, some of us. Again, as crazy as that sounds. And we oftentimes think that the faster we spin the hamster wheel, the faster we're going to go, or the further we're going to get with progress to our goals, our revenue, our profit, whatever it is, the thing that we're chasing. And I always ask the rhetorical question, have you been there? Think about that for a moment. Have you been there? Chances are, yes. I've been there many times. A lot of my friends and colleagues, especially the ones I know who are uber successful, they admit to have been there multiple times. And it wasn't until they got out of the hamster wheel that they were able to avoid the burnout, the anxiety, the stress, the 70 hours a week, and finally get back to being their best selves, being the best husband or spouse, father or wife, mother, whatever it might be. And we want to get away from that because I think that this is a big part of why a lot of entrepreneurs struggle and eventually quit or have major health issues because this is what it's done to them. So now I want you to I want you to picture yourself literally being burnt out. What would that look like? What would that feel like? And how close have you been in the past? I've been there. It led to a borderline catastrophic health issue that I'll tell you about a little bit later. But I often think that we can avoid this. And there's a lot of ways I'm going to talk about today to help you avoid burnout. And even to the point to where you feel like you're on the verge of burnout, which I think you'd be lying if you said you weren't there once or twice or more than that in your life. So before we go any further, first step is, why do you think a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses fail? The success rate for small businesses in America is something like 80% in 5 years and something like 70 some percent in 3 years. Think about that for a moment. It's could be a lot of answers. I usually get a lot of creative ones. But at the end of the day, most entrepreneurs fail or quit before things finally click. And we've probably known a couple who we thought had a successful business, but they just kind of gave up on it. Well, I've had the pleasure of growing up in a small business. I have a lot of friends and family that own businesses, and I've talked to probably thousands of them in my life. And the one thing that always comes up when I try to do some investigative research is none of them have a strategy. I'll zoom out for a moment because realistically, about 90% of the businesses I talk to do not have a plan. When I say a plan, I mean a documented strategy that is either printed off or is accessible very easily in your Dropbox or somewhere on your computer. But speaking of strategy, how many executives of big successful companies, how many head coaches of a professional sports team, any coach you want to name, show up to a season or a game without a plan? I don't know any. I am a fourth grade girls basketball coach, and I show up to my season and my games with a plan. And you say, Chris, third grade, fourth grade? Yeah. Yeah, we do. Now, we only have 2 plays, but we have 4 rules, and we're teaching. The goal is to get better, to have a framework, to have a foundation, because without a foundation, how do you build that big, beautiful, valuable home? You don't. Or if you try, it's not going to last very long and it's not going to be very valuable. So we need to have a game plan for everything we do. We need to have frameworks. And I think hopefully the older we get in business, the smarter we get and the more framework we have for things, because we can't just sit down and say, well, I'm just going to wing this one. I'm going to wing that one. That is not how we build success in anything in life. So as it relates to this strategy, a lot of times we talk about progress. It is really important when we build a plan that we have progress and not motion. A lot of people, when I talk to them or when I work with them, and especially in a coaching or in a consulting type environment, they'll say, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I've got all these things that I'm working on. But that's motion, because nothing is really getting closer to the deadline. Nothing is really progressing in terms of achieving our goals or getting ready to release this product. It is, we are just chasing our tail like a dog, right? We've all seen that. I've mentioned that before, but there's no measurable, tangible progress. And so when I talk about this, I'm talking about our behaviors. We need to start to change the way we do things, our daily actions, our daily behaviors. Some of that's a mindset thing, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Can never not work on your mindset. That's always a work in progress. And so I want you to think about motion versus progress when you start to look at kind of your personal actions, your personal results. How far are you when it comes to achieving your goals? or getting to higher revenue, getting to higher profitability. Now, normally when I'm doing these presentations or workshops on stage, I'll ask people to raise their hand. But since there's only 6 of us here, 5 of us here, we're going to guess. And I'm going to tell you the story about how I do this annual workshop, and there's about 225 people in the room. And I'm not kidding when I say about 10 of them raise their hand. When I say, who here has a strategy? 10, literally 10. And that when I ask the follow-up question, how many of you have it in documented format? Hands go down. Less than 10, probably 6 to 7 raise their hand. How could that be? Right? But that is the whole reason why so many of these entrepreneurs and small businesses come up short. They do things with no rhyme or reason, no purpose, no direction, hoping that something lands, hoping that something sticks. That is inconsistency. And that is the opposite of being strategic. In fact, that is what I call the light switch theory. The light switch theory is what entrepreneurs do when they're not strategic. They say something like, hey, we need more sales. We're going into our slow season, or we lost a sales rep. Whatever the case is, sales are down. Let's just flip a switch and let's run some ads on Facebook, or let's have a promotion or a discount. Let's send an email. That's reacting to a need. That is not proactive, that is reactive. And so when I talked about actions and behaviors before, what kind of actions and behaviors do we have? Are we proactive or are we reactive? And we don't want to be reactive because that is not being strategic. We can't flip a switch and expect tomorrow that all of a sudden I'm just going to raise my sales just because I have this big need all of a sudden that popped up. And so that is part of this whole grander plan, is not adapting that theory of flipping a switch and expecting results. That's very true in marketing. Talk to a lot of my clients about being proactive, being strategic, looking at the macro picture, not being reactive. Okay, so if you want to be proactive and you want to be strategic, think about what would be some ways that you could do that. And I'll give you just a quick second as I sip my coffee. Now, if you were guessing strategic, you'd be right. You'd be on the right track. But there are lots of ways that you can be proactive and be strategic. So, number one, for me, being proactive could be using a daily planner. Now, you could say, well, Chris, I have a daily calendar, I have a notebook, I write my notes in there. Okay, great. That would be a good start. That'd be a good first step. But that is not a good second step or a third step. That is not what the most highly productive people in the world do. What the most productive people do is they use a daily planner. And I don't mean like a cheap generic one you'd go get at Walmart or on Amazon. I mean one that's specifically designed to keep your goals in front of you. So, for example, we created a daily planner we have on Amazon. Not here to promote that, but I started using a planner and it changed a lot for me. It really, like, I'm talking about 4x my productivity. And it was, we couldn't really find one that we thought was going to work for us. So we made our own. And what I realized was that I have macro goals, which is annual goals, a lot based around revenue. It's based around profitability, and it's based on some other big things I want to do. Maybe it's writing a book, maybe it's a new product or new service. And ultimately, I realized that I needed to have quarterly and monthly goals, because if I only looked at those goals once or twice a year, pretty unlikely I'm going to achieve them. So I needed to write down the daily actions I needed to take, and I needed to keep my monthly goals in front of me. And then I would do a weekly recap to see if I won the week. The goal was, if I won the week, I would win more weeks. And if I won the month, I would then eventually stack those monthly victories. I'd win the quarter. And if I won all 4 quarters, I would win the year. And it was almost a bit of a gamification for us. And having a daily planner prevented things from slipping through the cracks, because we're all human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to forget about things, but we can't forget about our goals. We can't, because if they're out of sight, they're out of mind, especially for people like me who are sometimes forgetful. You also increases your follow-through rate. And guess what? If you have a higher follow-through rate, you have higher confidence. You have less stress, less anxiety, because you're getting shit done. That's simple. So Also, success yields confidence. Now, you might say, well, Chris, you don't need confidence. Probably true, but everybody could benefit from feeling that confidence of achieving your goals. It's just that simple. So, this was a bit of my light bulb moment, but I also had another light bulb moment where um, I was given a book while I was in the hospital. I was diagnosed with cancer. I was in hospital by myself mostly for a whole week while my wife was busy working and taking care of our kids and our home. And during that time, I was reading a book and I discovered something called the CTFAR model. CTFAR. I just want to repeat that in case it came out too quick. C stands for circumstances. Oh, as my dog's trying to make an appearance here. T for thoughts, F for feelings, A for actions, R for results. And I'll walk you through this brief story because I think it's important. It's a big part of what helped me achieve that 4X pivot where I became more productive, more successful, more confident, healthier. And the situation was this. Doctor says, hey, you've got cancer of the appendix, you've got enlarged lymph nodes, you've got a lot of bad stuff going on. Sat there for a couple of days, mostly by myself. Thoughts were negative, feelings were very negative. And I realized that the actions I would have had after would have been, oh, I'll just take this medicine and I'll be a cancer patient for the rest of my life. Little did I know, I mean, the outcome could have been where I take out half my colon, half my intestine. Could have been really, really bad outcome. Could have had chemo and radiation. Thankfully, I didn't have to go through that. So I realized this is not me. I don't know who I am, but I was in a very dark place. And I realized that by learning this model, I had to change the way I was thinking. I had to be positive. I had to say, you know what? I'm going to beat cancer. F this. And I did. But I said, okay, that's how I'm thinking. And I also need to change the way I feel. And that means changing my health, which we'll get to later, which means changing my actions. I got to eat better. I got to prioritize sleep. I have to exercise. I have to work on my mental health. I have to do other things that check the box, which is for me, it was professional development and education. And I realized that if I did that, that would enhance the way I was thinking, the way I was feeling. It would enhance my actions. And the results would be, guess what? I am more sharp. I have a better memory. I have more energy. And that has helped me tremendously change the results. I don't take medicine. I've never been healthier. And I just said, like, I'm not taking the 16 pills a day. I'm going to take my health in my own hands. And that is the CTFAR model. And you need to have the same mentality when it comes to your business and your life. If you want to make $1 million, but you're only making 150,000 now, look at the CTFAR model. Success is up to you. Now, I will say, disclaimer, I am a rare case. Not everyone can beat cancer the way that I did and not have to go through radiation and chemo and not have to take medicine. But I said, that's me. I'm an outlier. I was willing to take that risk, and I've never been better for it. But we have to take those calculated risks too. And from there, I really had to start to identify where it is that I want to go. Now, if I'm going to be this person and I'm going to get to my goals, great, but I really didn't have a roadmap. And that's where I wanted to introduce again this 2020 vision guide we're going to talk about. Because you can talk about being a millionaire. You can talk about buying that Ferrari or having a lake home or having these massive, elaborate vacations. But ultimately, you need to have clarity of vision. You need to have a roadmap for how you're going to be able to do these things. Otherwise, just saying them means nothing. It's like creating a strategy without an implementation plan. Good luck. It's useless and a waste of your time if you don't actually have the implementation part. So, why do you think most people don't achieve their goals? To me, it's clarity of vision. It's not having the roadmap and the vision guide to get there. But sometimes we have to self-audit a little bit. And that's where I just want to share my screen again, because if maybe you weren't on board, but now you're starting to think, hey, Chris, maybe you're onto something. This is the 2020 vision guide. Feel free to click the link to download it, scan the QR code. It's a free resource. And where we start with this typically is, I want to know what you want to achieve. Now, in your life, we've got business. Some of us have education, like, hey, I want to get better. I want to get my master's degree, or I want to get a certificate, or I want to get Google certified, whatever it is. Those are all educational things that are all very good. Mindset that was talked about by Jason before, relationship goals, health goals. You should have a goal for all of these things, in my opinion. As I told you, my health goal, what that was. And now my health goal is more muscle and fitness related. I have relationship goals, both with my family, my wife, and some friends. I also have mindset goals, which to me, I want to master my mindset. I wrote a book about it, so I need to be the master of, or the king of my mental domain, as I say. Also, education is important because clients come to me expecting that I have a lot of answers around sales and leadership and marketing. So I try to be the best I can be and the most knowledgeable so I can have those intelligent conversations. So I read 30 some books a year. I have business goals and revenue goals. Now, more importantly, as we get to the next section, it's like, okay, what are your SMART goals? Specifically, you say, yes, mindset's important, education, these are the things I want to do. Well, let's quantify them. Let's put them into a SMART goal so we know how to achieve them. And there's a little bit more because we want to have at least one goal for each of these things. And I want to share this next screen here because this lays it out a little bit differently. Now, I mentioned behaviors before. What behaviors do you need to start doing? So if you said reading, I want to read 20 books a year or 30 books a year like you, Chris. Well, maybe that means we need to stop watching Netflix and TV at night because that's really not adding any value. Yeah, you do need to watch some. Everyone needs to chill out and they need to just veg out from time to time. There's nothing wrong with that. But instead of scrolling through your phone aimlessly on social media from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night, why don't you start reading? 15 to 20 minutes a day on average. That gets you about 30 some books a year. That's it. I mean, it's literally that easy. And that's all I do. My wife does about 2 to 3 times more than that. So if you have a revenue goal of $1 million, maybe that's too high. Maybe it's $500,000. What are some of the behaviors you're going to need to change? Do you have to start getting up at 6 a.m. instead of 7? Do you need to start working out so that you have more energy to be able to work a little bit harder and smarter? So we need to talk about that. Now, what are your barriers? People say, I don't have time. That is absolute BS. You will not find the time. You have to make the time. I've got some really good friends that we play a lot of golf. Well, they play a lot more golf than me. They say, oh, is this the summer we're going to play more golf? And sadly, I always say no. And I came to the realization years ago that summers are short here in Wisconsin, not much different than my Canadian friends to the north. And we've only really got about 4.5, 5 months of good golf weather where you don't have to bundle up and wear hats and gloves. And so I'm reminded oftentimes in October and September, I better take advantage of this opportunity because in 2 months, I'm going to wish that I did, right? Because these summers are sacred to us. So I said, I'm going to block time, a couple times a month to go do the thing that I love because it fills my bucket. And by filling my bucket, my cup, I can fill the cup of others. And so I don't say time's an issue because guess what? Oh, Chris, I can't read 30 books a year. I'm too busy. Bullshit. You can schedule time in your calendar. And when 9 o'clock comes around, turn the TV off, turn your phone off, because guess what? Those things aren't helping you do anything. They're not helping you get better. And just read for 20 minutes. Do it 5 times a week. Don't do it 7 days a week. You'll be amazed at the impact it has for you. So identify the barriers. You're going to laugh when you look at the barriers because they're really not barriers, they're just excuses. And that is one of the maybe the biggest takeaways you might have from today's workshop is barriers are ultimately excuses. Now, if you said, Chris, I can't afford books, I've got no money, well, go to the half price bookstore. You can get books for a fraction of the price buying them used. Go to garage sales, go to the library. There's a lot of ways to get around these BS barriers that we have. And then ultimately we have to identify what would achieving these goals mean to us, because oftentimes we say we have a goal, but we need to really quantify, like, why are we doing this? What would really make this impactful for me? Or maybe it's my family or the things I could do for my family. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And when I talk about all of this, really, we have to create our own personal recipe. And I say recipe is interchangeable for strategy. I just like to use the word recipe. When I wrote my first book, I talked about recipe. And ultimately, let's talk about chili. You want to make chili for dinner tonight? Well, you can go to Google, you can go to Pinterest, you can go anywhere. You can look for chili recipes, and guess what? Every single one is different. Every one. There's literally millions of recipes for chili on the internet today. And I'm not kidding. That's a fact. Millions. So what do you make? Well, I would argue that you might make it based on what's in your proverbial pantry, the time that you have. Because guess what? Some people make it in an Instapot. Some people make it in a crock pot. Some people make it in a Dutch oven. A lot of ways to make it. Some people make it with ground beef, ground turkey, chicken, brisket, spicy, not spicy. I can go on and on. There's no right or wrong answer, but you have to create the recipe that you want based on your vision, based on what you have in the proverbial pantry, your utensils, and the time that you have. If you're 60 years old, you may not have the same launch pad or runway that I have in my 40s, and that's okay. But we have to create a goal and a plan that's reasonable and attainable. And so build your recipe based on what you want. Now, talked about barriers a little bit, but ultimately these things, it's up to you. So when you go through this, ask yourself, what can't I live without? Because what I want versus what I can't live without are two different things. People say, oh, I want $1 million. Well, you can live without $1 million. In fact, you could probably live with your current revenue for most of us, but put that bar a little bit higher than what it is now to add some pressure, but not too much pressure and anxiety where you'll never be able to achieve it. From there, I want you to write down, what are your non-negotiables? Because when I ask this question to a lot of people, they say, well, I don't know. Well, I don't just let people randomly book time with me. Protecting my time is a non-negotiable. So when people reach out and they want to meet with me, I say, okay, what did you want to meet about? Did you want to ask about my services? Did you want to sell me your services or something else? And they usually say something else before they get to their sales pitch. But I try to create barriers to protect my time because my time's valuable and I can't waste it. Otherwise, I can't work on my business to make more revenue and more profit. So what are you willing to sacrifice? I'm willing to sacrifice my time at night, TV time, social media time, because it doesn't do any good, especially in the US around the election cycle. It doesn't do me any good scrolling through social media. And when you do this, you're really going to start to inch yourself closer to the results that you want to achieve in life. What does it mean? In the end, when you go through all this and you start to do the things, you start to have a roadmap, you start to feel like you're living a fulfilled life. And fulfillment is the joy that eliminates anxiety and stress and burden. Fulfillment also means you're generating revenue, you're more profitable, you're more efficient and effective with your time and your job. And that is something that we all strive for. In fact, I would say fulfillment's more important than the money because nothing beats feeling that good. Nothing. But it's also getting back to self-love. That's part of what fulfillment is for me. It also helps you achieve financial freedom. And it's living with direction, with clarity, with purpose, and ultimately productivity. So I want to go through before I wrap it up, because I'm almost done, our hustle framework, because we talk about this, our business is hustle leadership. And so often the word hustle has a negative connotation. And so when I talk about doing these things, I do talk about hustling. I do talk about working hard and grinding, but that doesn't mean working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. In fact, I would argue you shouldn't do that. You should never do that because we all need to have a life, whether that life means reading and education and doing things that's not TV and not scrolling through social media. Hustle is something that means this. It's an acronym. H means hard work. U is for unrelenting, because we have to have commitment to persistence and prioritization in our life. Smarter, not just harder. It's not just a cliche phrase. It means you got to do you. You got to have goals. You got to create space for deep work and focus on your vision guide. T is taking chances. It's failing forward, not being afraid to learn, to step outside your comfort zone. And L is for learning from others. That's networking. It's jumping on calls like this. It is being curious, listening to podcasts, all those things that we probably already do. E is enjoying the process. We have to celebrate the small victories along the way. Because if you're celebrating small victories every day, guess what? You're going to win the year pretty easily, as I mentioned before. And so it's really important to pat yourself on the back, to give your colleagues high fives, because the more victories we're celebrating, the more we're getting to achievement of our goals. So that's about it. If any of that was interesting, if any of that was compelling, just a ploy to check out our podcast, Hustle Nation. You can check it out at iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or just go to hustlenationpodcast.com. And other than that, I'm an open book. If anyone wants to connect with me, my contact info will be in the chat. Available on LinkedIn, Alignable. I've got a website, iamchrisburns.com. I don't know if there's any Q&A, Marianne, but would love to extend the conversation if anyone's interested. I think you're muted.
Yes, there's no questions, but you can add your information on my Facebook page, right where we're going live, and you can also share it and put it on your page any which way you wish. Thank you so much, Chris. As always, it's such a pleasure hearing from you, and he has such a good story, right? Like it's perfect for healthology. I mean, really, it's fantastic. So thank you so much, Chris. Have yourself a great day. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and your information.